it, I saw birds, 2 birds.
Here we are. We're finally in the home stretch on this roof. It's time for us to get it done. There isn't anything that could possibly go wrong at this point. Is there? So let me show you what we ended up with on the top roof. And at least as of right now, this is how I'm going to be finishing out to the wall with each of these ridge caps. Essentially what we did down here on the bottom is just a fold down and over. This is the notorious corner, so we're going to just take it nice and easy. But you can kind of see that. It's folded over both ways there. And then back up here at the top, all we did up here is, this is a second sheet, and we cut a strip of 4+ inches off on both ends of the hem so that this piece would go over and wrap as nice as I could get it. And there's a little bitty gap right through there where it's not, it could get underneath. And so I'm just gonna put, a big fat bead of some metal to metal caulk there and call that good enough. And if it did happen to get under that little bit there, it's not something that I'm super worried about because it's just gonna hit that pan and come right out again. And, at the end of the day, I don't feel like I need to try and do some additional bend up to try and get that up underneath the siding material. That would probably be correct. I honestly don't know. This is what I'm doing. It's just that one little bit that needs caulked. All right, so here's this unmitigated disaster from last time. I'm hoping will go better. We're on the roof that's over the deck. That's on the east side of the house, which is downslope. And I am going to use as much of this as I have. It won't cover the full deck, but it should get most of it. Last time, the heat made it very, very difficult to work with. You can go back and see that video here, and boy, was I not thrilled with it. So let me show you where I'm at right now to start. So I knew this roof had a bow in the center outwards, and then the 2 posts on the outside were closer into the wall by an inch or so. And so I wanted to make sure that when I laid out for this roof, for the metal sheathing, that I accounted for that. So over yonder is a line. You can barely see it, but it's kind of right next to that piece of tape. Here's one, and then I'm standing right here next to one. And you can see this one has 2. I actually redid this because I found that I was off. And I started by doing a right angle here and acting like this was all correct. And then I remembered that corner is not correct. So then I went back over here off of the wall and found one of the ribs, and I'm lining them up to the ribs. That's kind of the layout I'm doing. And then I pulled over to here and found my 8 feet. And then on the other side, I found 80 inches. And then I made a triangle out of this. And obviously that was correct because I'd made it correct. And then just did right triangle calculations with this and found the angle. And, this seemed to be pretty close. And so then I went over here and I double checked it and made another one. That's the 80-inch one. And I checked to make everything square here. And I came back and looked, and sure enough, this one was off. So I pushed it over to where it's supposed to be, and that corrected that triangle. First thing I can tell you is cut off a little strip on the end so that you can actually hear something down to start this puppy out, and get it as best you can orientation wise. If you have 2 people, this would be so much easier, but all I'm doing here, and it is heating up so fast, so I've got to be careful when I lay this down. So I'm just going to run it out, see how far it comes, cut off any extra that I need to cut off here on the trough, and call that good, and just make it as smooth and as nice as I can. And I'm just trying to keep it relatively off of the edge so it can come up a little bit. You can see that there's a pucker right there, so that should come out okay. All right, so keep her folded, right? That's what I learned last time. You're gonna smooth with your hands as you go. That'll help out a little bit. And then each time you pull, you just let it roll towards you a little bit. And if it starts sticking, you gotta watch for that on the edges like that. You gotta fix that right away. That tar is something else. And so then you're fixing that as you go. Everything's looking pretty good. It looks like I'm at a point now where I'm gonna have to kind of cut this a little bit as I start to roll this next piece out, as it's gonna be up onto there, and I don't really want it up that high. The original piece that I cut out of this corner for my first estimate of where I was all gonna end up, it should fit into that spot. It won't have the proper overlap of 4 inches or whatever it was it's supposed to be, like this much is the overlap you're supposed to have, but it'll be fine for what I'm doing here. That didn't go too bad. Let's get this little corner on. Kind of a mangled piece of membrane is part of why I chose to cut off that corner and work it separate. And one thing I'm doing right now is got a little air pocket. Sometimes you can kind of find a spot to work that out, like working it up or working it down, but I might do this from down below, or maybe I'll just sit, I don't know. But it's just gonna get a little bit of overlap at least. It's gonna sit on there just like that. So it should have like 2 inches, I think. So let me show you how I'm figuring out what I'm doing as far as these angle cuts. It should be a 45, but you know, what's the length for each of these segments? We're figuring this piece, right, is the next one. Laps down to that white line, comes across. So what I'm doing is these are 3-foot sheets, and I know that I want down to that line for lap. So I just find where half of 3 foot or 18 inches happens to be, and it's about here. So I'll mark that, and then I'll measure this way to the wall, and I'm just putting it to where I can kind of force it underneath. Ooh, there's a honeybee. Definitely don't want him to get stuck. This little guy here. Poor little thing. I think he's still alive though, he was moving. Anywho, measure that over, make sure that, you know, we're gonna be able to fit it underneath, and that's the cut we're doing. Which in this particular case for this next piece is about 32 inches. So let's go cut that. Get it out to 32 inches, somewhere in the middle-ish. We're gonna go ahead and mark that right there. So I know where 32 is. Then on this other side, where we're cutting, we're gonna find our 18. And measure off there. It's about there. And then this is pretty close to a right angle. So we're gonna say about 18 again. I don't mind losing a little slop, so I'm not gonna be more accurate than that. There's our line, so we're just gonna give that a cut. And essentially just something in that realm is all I really need. I don't need it to be super accurate. While Casey's down getting the next piece of metal ready for that side, I'm over here on the other side prepping the Z-flash, and I ran out, so I used a scrap of some sidewall. End wall, actually. You can see that. Big leg, same step up, 1 inch and 1 inch out, and so it'll work just fine. Not really any big difference. And again, we're gonna be scrapping in that membrane on this whole side here. So, you know, I'll fill this all the way up, and then the middle, we'll just take as much as we can get in this space. But the corners are all going to be 100% scrapped in. Hi.
You tricked me.
I did. I tricked you. All right. Go with my foot. That should pinch that up there. There we go. Nice and tight there. We're just off by that slight amount on the angle. That's all that's doing that. This membrane has been much harder to work with than it seems to be for other people. I've watched using it online, and my best guess as to what's happening there is that we got, I don't know if it's a faulty batch. I think it was just expired. I had heard something about that, and I still had one of the boxes, this last box, and I looked for an expiration date and a manufacture date on the box, and I didn't see them printed anywhere. But that's something to consider and to think about, to look for maybe if you're working with a product that's like this, because I mean, you saw the previous video, you know, boy, this stuff can be hard to work with. So having done 2 roofs with this material now, here are my suggestions if you're going to be using it. The first is make sure that you're working when it's cooler, not when it's hotter if you can. It is very sticky, and the hotter it gets, the more it sticks. My second suggestion is if you're going to be working by yourself, work in extra short sections, maybe 10 feet at a time even. I would not do more than 20 even with 2 people unless the conditions are just absolutely ideal. And the third is really what I mentioned before, make sure that the stuff is recently manufactured. It does appear to have a shelf life as far as how easy it is to put on. Roll out your sections that you have cut, your pre-cuts, or however far you're going to, all the way out, and make sure that you've got it in a straight line and see what that looks like. And maybe go ahead and tack down the very beginning of your roll right at the start, and then that way you know you're lined up. You can roll it back in, because it's a lot easier to unroll a little bit at a time and stick down, is what I found, versus having a big long flat sheet and peeling off the backer all at once. Well, after the clown show that happened last time, I was not about to try and roll that whole thing out again. This worked much better. So like everything else with this metal roofing, we just made a discovery which simultaneously I should have seen earlier, and also, you know, it's just another example where this has been wrong. You know, it's crazy to me. So these are all 6-foot sheets, and when I had counted out and done an inventory when we'd first had all these issues, I'd counted the number, seen that they should be about the right size for the roof. Stupid me, and this was my mistake, I didn't measure them exactly. So 72 inches is 6 feet. 6 feet is not long enough for an overhang that is 6 feet and then taken up onto a vertical, you know, onto an angle. So every one of those sheets are too small. We've got like maybe 4 of them around, you know, the angles up above that will get used. So we'll be able to do most of like the starting point on one side for the main field, and then we'll be able to do pretty much all, but not quite all, of the sides, and then the entire middle field and then the far end are just going to have to wait until we, you know, get the order in. And I don't know, given how long ago this was, they're almost certainly not going to want to pay for this. So they should.
Yeah.
So we're just doing 8 feet the first time. Casey's got 10 foot there on the roll. And our overlap piece, we have a line here, and there's the exact same line underneath. And I marked that with pencil so I would know. Same on the bottom. You know, so we've got like 3 or 4 inches of overlap there. And then, you know, whatever that is, 4 or 6. And then that lets us have this be lined up with the previous sheet. And we just rolled it out to test now that we're adhered on that strip, and it looks like it should be good. A little bit more here than it is there, but just the hairiest hair, and that's plenty, and I'm happy with it. And Casey has an idea.
It's a small thing, but this paper, this backing paper, is the perfect thing to wrap up and store artwork, or to trace, you know, kids on, do art on. You gotta find your silver linings.
Yeah, at least there's that. That looks good. Nice job. So we're wrapping up for the day on this, and partly that's because we don't really have the metal to push as far as I'd hoped. We'll make a supply run for some other things. Let me work on the upper roof what little needs done left and some other activities. And this roll of tar actually went farther than I thought, this membrane. Let me show you. So we're just about out, pretty much. We filled this completely. We're going to be able to fill in kind of right in here. And then Casey's cutting that piece there. And then we'll have enough for like right in here. And that's pretty good. I'll probably just take it zip tape and double up this top in between. Won't have this little bitty strip of membrane, but again, this ended up being extra. It's not required on this roof. Originally, I thought it was going to be required on this roof, and we went a steeper slope, so it's not. So foggy morning, yet again, waiting for the sun to come out enough to get all of the water off of the roof so I can finish up what I can do before the metal arrives. We did end up calling and talking to the supply yard where we'd purchased our metal roof from, and even though it's been since January, they did agree to make it right. Thank goodness for that. You know, just another expense we didn't need. So we went ahead and, you know, ordered the parts we'll need for that little bump out, which were only a handful, but nevertheless. And, you know, the sheets where we're essentially switching out, because we did have some longer ones that could have worked for this. They're just way overkill, 9 feet and 10, and we need less than 8. So we went ahead and switched those, and you know, that gives us, essentially it makes those parts less expensive than they would have been. So honestly, this couldn't have worked out any better, and we really appreciate them doing that. And it goes a long way towards my feeling less mad at them for all of the mistakes that were made with this metal order. So I'll have to ponder on that if we end up doing anything in metal again, whether to use them or go through somebody else. But we're in a good spot. We just need to wait for the product to come in. For the moment, I can work on this gutter here. And so I've gone ahead and got this piece installed in. And instead of using the stuff that comes with these joints, I'm using a flexible seal, which is designed for metal amongst other things. And, you know, it's kind of like the Lexel that we've used in several places as well, just not as expensive. And we happen to have, you know, several bottles. So I've gooped here all up and around with it. You know, there's a line here that's going to be covered, but nevertheless, I went ahead and gooped that line. And then worked here, that corner, which, you know, they don't give you any stuff with it, but it leaks on every one of the corners where I haven't done this. So I went down and buttered that, got this one really good. And so now I can put the downspout on and, you know, continue all the way down to there. It does look like we are going to be, I don't know, 4 or 5 sticks short of the actual gutter itself, which probably just a miscalculation on my part as far as math goes. That was one where I had done the count, and we did, you know, essentially ruin one full-length gutter worth, you know, as far as like little bits and pieces of cuts. So, you know, I mean, I don't want to put any more seams into this gutter than I have to, and a couple of other pieces of this gutter is worth it to me to not have any more seams than necessary. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.